Have you heard of any classified planes being flown during the Persian Gulf War?
Why would you need to expose a secret plane to an air force that runs to Iran whenever you take to the air?
What about UFO activity during that period?
Yeah, UFOs cause the Gulf War syndrome. That's a good one.
That's why we like you, Mulder. Your ideas are weirder than ours.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering the X-Files, the podcast in which a newbie, that's me, takes a deep dive into the entirety of Chris Carter's creepy universe, as longtime fans escort me on the journey, a journey filled with paranoid conspiracies and monsters of the week. I'm Erix Antoine, and today, Daniel and I will be discussing E.B.E., which originally aired in the US on February 18th, 1994. It was written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong and directed by William Graham. In this episode, Mulder and Scully investigate the apparent smuggling of a crashed UFO and its pilot all across America. They find themselves in over their heads with the customary cloak and dagger intrigue that an X-Files conspiracy brings. Jerry Hardin is on hand once again in this episode to really flesh out the mysterious character of Deep Throat and reveal new layers to the complex X-Files mythology. After the break, Daniel and I are going to get into it, so stick around.
From the trucker's description, the shape he fired upon could conceivably have been a mountain lion's.
Conceivably.
The National Weather Service last night reported atmospheric conditions in this area, which were possibly conducive to lightning.
Possibly.
It is feasible that the truck was struck by lightning, creating the electrical failure.
It's feasible.
And you know, there's a marsh over there. Those lights the driver saw may have been swamp gas.
Swamp gas? How can a dozen witnesses, including a squad of police vehicles in 3 counties, become hysterical over swamp gas?
Welcome to another inconclusive mythology episode of the X-Files. I mean, that's just me being kind of a dick. This one's not completely inconclusive. It certainly does give us some information.
Yes.
Primarily about, we get a lot of info about Deep Throat and the depths of his involvement in this situation.
Yes.
It starts to become a lot more clear. His motivation, a little unexpected, but interesting certainly, and that sort of thing. So overall, I guess it isn't as inconclusive, although it still is somewhat inconclusive. But let's get into it. What are your feelings about this episode as a fan?
I think it is Fallen Angel Take 2 and way better the second time around.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It expands on that. It has a very similar formula, right, to what happened in Fallen Angel. And I guess at least this time we get something.
Right.
We get something. It's that we're not left completely hanging. We do get something. So,
of course, if anyone doesn't remember, the plot of Fallen Angel is that there was a downed UFO, and the entire episode is set within a single area, single town on the surrounding woods. Aliens scurrying about the forest in its little predator mode, being hunted by the military. And while I like that episode, since it's confined to one city, it's just them going back and forth between the hospital and the military base over and over and over again. Whereas this, it's an aircraft was downed, but the MacGuffin is an alien body is being transported around the country in the back of an 18-wheeler, and they're trying to get their hands on the truth. And because it's on an 18-wheeler traveling from the eastern seaboard to mostly the Western Seaboard. It turns it in less of them investigating in a small town and more of them chasing it all over the place. It turns it into a chase film, if we want to use the movie of the week scenario here, and it just makes it more exciting. It's got a faster pace. It's lots more twists and turns. It just gives them more opportunity to jazz the whole scenario up more than they did the first time around when they tried this.
Right. Well, I mean, one thing I remember about Fallen Angel, and I think we talked about this. Right. This is the one that also had like the sort of paranoid guy, the epileptic guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that it seemed to me like it was trying to do two things at once. And so by splitting its focus, it ended up sort of being a little bit all over the place. And the most interesting thing about that episode was the guy, the guest star, the Max. And the other stuff just wasn't as interesting. And so the episode kind of fell apart because of that. Whereas here, at the very least, yeah, it's a lot more focused. As you say, it's more about the chase. It's more about them investigating. It really taps into that whole paranoia thriller vibe. But that's what it is. I mean, Mulder ends up tearing his apartment to bits like Gene Hackman at the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess in that sense, yeah, it's a lot more engaging, a lot more involving because of that. What I'm assuming is that this episode must have been really hyped when it aired. I get the sense it was probably one of those things like tonight, Mulder gets closer to the truth. You know what I mean? And just like, they really probably pushed that angle, even though the whole thing turns out to be a big tease. They really probably pushed that angle of it, where there were going to be great revelations in this episode, is what the promos would probably have had you believe.
Oh, I guarantee. I don't quite remember them from that time frame, and obviously I didn't look them up, but I'm pretty sure that they probably pushed this one pretty hard, especially since we really don't get another mythology episode this season again until the season finale. So they probably pumped the gas really hard on this one to make it land so that it would stick in people's consciousness. Make sure that they remembered to watch this one specifically so they'd know what the hell was going on when we got to the finale a few more weeks later.
Yeah, and I guess this episode is also notable for being the introduction of the Lone Gunmen.
Yes.
Who reportedly they were not intended to be recurring characters. They just kind of thought them up for this one episode. Yeah. But then they proved to be so popular that they brought them back.
Yeah, they even cast a crew member as one of them because that was just a one-off. They just threw him in there as a gag.
Oh, I think the crew member is like the creepy one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the one that's hitting on Scully from moment one.
Yes. We'll see what happens with those characters. They are very much the big nerd cliche.
Oh yeah.
That's what they are from the moment they appear. They're very much the way they talk, the way they look. It seems strange that they thought of them just for this one episode when they went to such lengths to make them very sort of singular and memorable. That it just seems strange to me that
Yeah, they're really compelling from frame one. So they're fully formed characters, at least in the confines of what they are supposed to be doing in the scene. So yeah, it is kind of weird that they're were initially meant to just be throwaways that you'd never revisit again. Maybe you'd hear him talk about them at some point, but they're just way too entertaining to just only use once and toss in the trash bin.
Yeah, definitely. And my favorite bit is when Mulder calls him and he's like, turn the recorder off, it's me. And he's all like, okay. It was like, I said turn it off. It's off. And we can see in the background that it's not off. Going. It's still going. Like that's the bet. That was the part that got a big laugh from me. Definitely. I got a kick out of that one.
Yeah, that bit is good. The one when I think it's Byers says, "That's why we like you, Mulder. Your theories are even weirder than ours." That's a good bit. And then in terms of writing, you can see why they had them in there just to set the things in motion, because you get Scully's speech about how ridiculously paranoid and insane they all are when they get back to their, basement office at the FBI building. And then, of course, mid-speech, she accidentally yanks her pen open and the recording device is right there. So it's like he immediately invalidates everything she was just saying.
Right. Well, that's actually something that I wanted to discuss. This episode, I mean, at this point, Scully would have to concede
Oh yeah.
that there's something to Mulder's alien conspiracy theories. I mean, but come on, like now she's in the thick of it. She's been involved. I don't know what wild skepticism she's going to throw in there, but she knows there's something happening. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very clear that the whole chase that they go on, the fact that they're bugged, she knows there's something going on, definitely. And so, is it really that far-fetched to believe that it could be a conspiracy involving aliens? You know?
The pen thing was funny because when they were signing for the rental car at the airport, and it took a beat to have that woman go, "Hey, can I borrow your pen for a moment?" And then she gives it to her and keeps talking, and then she gets it back. I'd completely forgotten about the bug, and I was sitting and thinking, "Wow, I wonder whose like friend or wife or what crew member got that cameo that they just put in there for fun." And then a couple minutes later, you're like, "Oh, okay, that's why that was in there."
I enjoy the chase aspect to it. I
Hmm.
like that whole sequence when they split up and like Scully's off buying the plane tickets, and
Hmm.
that whole part is nicely orchestrated. Then when they're standing at the, I guess it's a magazine shop, it's like a newsstand
Yeah.
at the airport or something, I guess, and they're just like talking. I like that whole element. I like how that's put together a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of smaller moments that are really like in this episode. Even early on, when you see Mulder investigating after the cold open, and Scully keeps throwing out, the stock government theories. Oh, this weather balloon, and
Yeah,
he
swamp
just keeps
gas.
going. Yeah, well, he keeps going. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
plausible. And you can tell he's listening to her, but he's just not buying any of it. And then she goes with the swamp gas theory, and he goes, "Swamp gas."
Well, okay, so there's one thing that I'm a little bit unclear on, and that's
Hmm.
early on the guy, what's his name, Ranheim?
Something like that.
Yeah, the truck driver,
Hmm.
who's actually ultimately like an agent or something. But that first scene where we see him, yeah, at the opening of the episode, when there's this figure above the truck, which I guess is some kind of a craft. Were they trying to rescue the alien
I
creature? I
think
mean, is
so.
that what we're meant to understand from that?
I
And
think so.
so, right. And but by the end of it, we are also meant to understand that the alien creature is dead. The alien creature that they're referring to at the end is
Mhm.
the alien creature from Roswell, the
No,
one
I
that
got the.
like is not in that window or is not in that little room. Like Mulder's looking into the window and the bed's empty. Is that the one from the truck or is that some other alien creature?
It's. I think it's the one from the truck. Whatever being they recovered from the craft that was shot down by the Iraqi pilot. I think the pilot was Iraqi. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I would assume it was alive until it got to its final destination, and Deep Throat could oversee its execution.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I saw it too. But then again, when they run into the truck, when they intercept the truck, or then there's the flash of light, that whole thing happens. They go in the
Hmm.
truck and they see that the bed or whatever, the gurney is empty. And Mulder's theory is that I think this was a rescue.
Well, the stopwatch was his dead giveaway because then he realizes that they've been duped. The
Right,
government or whoever had faked the rescue attempt, and they had just been following the wrong truck, I would imagine.
right. It was a wild goose chase
Yeah,
that
a
basically that
decoy.
Deep Throat put him on. I mean,
Oh yeah,
Deep
for the
Throat put
second
him on
time in a
that.
row.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just one long wild goose chase. All the scenes are interesting. The scenes with Deep Throat when he meets him at the aquarium, that's a good scene. Uh, we get a lot of insight into Deep Throat, and I like the way this character is developing. I like that
Hmm.
there are layers to him because in previous episodes we start to question, whose side he's really on,
Yeah.
what he's doing, and then what he reveals at the end is that he's trying his best to help Mulder while still hobbling him.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like he's hobbling him to a point, but he's still giving him just enough so he can keep going. Because he tells him, don't stop swimming.
Mm-hmm.
So, he gives him just enough so he can keep going, but he hobbles him because he has to.
The implication being is that, he has been deep within this conspiracy for decades upon decades, was probably a militant believer behind it at one point, but his conscience has just weighed on him too much over the years, to the point where he would like to have it all exposed. He's too much of a coward to do it himself. So he uses Mulder as his filter.
That speech he's got at the end, that whole monologue is really great. That whole scene is really interesting. You know how they managed to break into the facility, and then he's down there, and it looks like Mulder's goose is cooked until then.
Yeah.
yeah. Deep Throat shows up. It's like, all right, guys, stand down. And then he's all like, I know you really want to look in that window, but there's really no point. And that whole speech though is really interesting. The idea that here's this guy who's a government stooge basically, and he's connected enough, and we get the sense that he's connected and that he has a certain level of authority, but of course there are people above him, and he had to function as an assassin. The idea that he personally pulled the trigger to execute the alien, that whole thing, how he did that, and how the way he describes it and everything. I mean, it really is it's a very intriguing piece of dialogue that tells you a lot about that character.
Both about his mentality at the time when he killed the first one, or his first one, until now. I don't know if he pulled the trigger himself this time, but I guarantee you he gave the order to do it.
Yeah. I mean, the one that he pulled the trigger on, I guess, is the one from Roswell.
Well, Roswell would have been in the 50s. So, and the one he pulled the trigger on, he talks about the downed aircraft in Vietnam when he was still working for the CIA. And what he says, he's one of three individuals who's had the quote unquote pleasure of executing an extraterrestrial being for being unfortunate enough to crash land on our planet.
I just think it's an interesting wrinkle, and it's not something that I expected. I certainly did not expect that we were going to find out that Deep Throat was such a hands-on person. Figured he was more like a puppet master, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that he was a hands-on person, right? But this is back, I guess the Vietnam thing, he was still rising up in rank, right? So at that point, he was just he was lower ranked, and he was given the order to execute, and he did it. And just that whole idea that he's doing this because he wants to atone for it, like he understands that this was the wrong approach, that the decision that this coalition, what is it? It's Soviets, like he describes it. It's
and the Chinese. He said, Soviet Russia, the UK, China, and both Germanys was the way he described it.
Right. So in his mind, this coalition, they had it wrong, but he had to follow orders, and he has to continue to, I guess, follow orders or give orders if in fact they had to execute that alien. But like what I was saying at the beginning, how this was probably a very hyped episode, because I'm sure that they gave people the impression that you were going to get answers.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, there isn't going to be another Mythology episode until the end of the season, which is a few episodes down the line. So yeah, I guess it was the big event one. It aired in February. It aired in February of '94, which would mean, I guess it aired during sweeps.
Nowadays, technically, sweeps is considered April and May, but Sweeps isn't even as big a thing now as it used to be. So it's hard to
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah, I mean,
definitely post-winter hiatus is what it would have been.
yeah, I mean, Sweeps, I think, is nothing. It's just that everything's so dominated by like streaming platforms now that I don't even know if the concept of Sweeps even exists anymore.
I'm not sure if it does either. And even if you set aside streaming services and binge watching online TV shows, the whole concept of the DVR has kind of annihilated Nielsen ratings and Sweeps in general because, I mean, hell, I've got probably 3 shows with full seasons sitting on my DVR right now that were recorded earlier this year that I haven't watched yet. I would assume the ratings counted because I recorded them, but I actually haven't watched them yet. I'll probably get to them, in a month or so when I'm on my work hiatus. But yeah, I think between streaming and high usage of DVRs, Sweeps is just kind of probably more of a ceremonial thing now than it is an actual important element of television.
Is there anything we have not brought up about this episode?
I had some questions when I was watching it about the truck driver because it's unclear. It's clear that he knows he's transporting something, classified, and he will obviously lie to get himself out of any situation if he can. But I have to wonder before he was arrested exactly how clued in he was onto what he was hauling because, one would think if you knew that you were hauling an alien body across the United States to an undisclosed location, you would
Yes,
think you
yeah.
would just wait for, your shadowy people to bail you out and set you on your way. By him doing that is what immediately clued Mulder into the situation.
I kind of get the sense that that truck driver, although I mean he's clearly involved because you see him. I mean that when they go to the facility, he's there. So he does work
Mhm.
with them, right? I mean he's somebody who's involved, but he has a different. I get the sense that his level of clearance is not that high. He's obviously not somebody who could access level 6, for example.
Yeah, I'm imagining that he was probably clued in after he was released from police custody early on in the episode. Don't mention saucer men from Mars as the reason that you pulled your truck off the road and started firing erratically into the sky.
It's also possible that I mean, he's just told to transport something
Mm,
somewhere.
yeah,
He's not given details. He knows it's something classified. He knows it's something top secret. Maybe he doesn't really know exactly what it is.
yeah,
Maybe he just assumes it's some kind of a experimental weapon or whatever. But he doesn't. I don't know that he understands exactly what it is he's transporting.
yeah. He clearly didn't early on.
Yeah, I mean, you get the sense that when that spacecraft shows up, it blows him away. Like he wasn't expecting that at all. And if I'm driving a truck and I know I've got an
Mhm.
alien in the back of my truck, then if a UFO shows up, it's kind of like, oh well, that makes sense. I mean, they're probably here to pick up their friend. You know, it wouldn't be something that would surprise you. I mean, I guess if there's a murkiness here, if there's something that still remains slightly murky in that sense, it's the why. Like, why would this coalition decide that assassinating these aliens is the way to go? And it's one thing for them to decide that back in 1947, but why would they continue to hold that policy now? And I guess maybe we're supposed to have that doubt in our minds, like they know something about these alien visitors that we don't know. Like maybe these alien visitors, their intentions may not be benign. I mean, but what exactly, that's the part that stays murky because Deep Throat feels bad about it. It's not something he's proud of. He's trying to atone for it, and this is why he sort of lets Mulder continue his investigation, even as he has to kind of hobble him a little bit. But we don't understand why. Like, why the hostility towards the aliens? That part is unclear.
Yeah, that's very much left up in the air, and I guess for the viewer to ponder until the showrunners deem that it's time to start elaborating on that further, which they will at a later point. But I guess more than anything, right now, all they're trying to give us is a view into exactly how powerful Deep Throat is, what his placement is within whatever shadowy conspiracy is going on, and how he feels about it, what his motivations are at this point, or at least what he's willing to say that his motivations are.
I gotta say, it's a little bit of a cliche, but I did enjoy the final image of the episode. Like Deep Throat literally walking into the shadows.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, you guys are laying it on thick, but it's a cool image. Definitely looks, he's a man of mystery. He's got his cloak. He's like Robert Stack in Unsolved Mysteries. He's like walking through the fog, like just walking away, like walking, fading into the shadows, just fading into the distance. This engulfing fog. All of a sudden, there's so much fog outside this like government facility. I was like, where did all that fog come from? All right, well, but it's definitely a cool image. It's a memorable image. It's an appropriate image for the character. It's very comic booky. It's very like iconographic. You know what I mean? And I giggled a little bit, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, visually it is cool. I have to admit, it's cool.
Yeah, that's one of those genre tropes that just hits my sweet spot and make me smile. The foggy night and someone walking off and just sort of dematerializing into it, or if you have like a fog swept cemetery that very much looks like it's on a studio set and not out in the real world. That kind of stuff just makes my inner child squeal with delight. But yeah, and also between his monologue, where he reveals some stuff about himself, and then you get that parting shot, it feels like the kind of ending to an episode that you would see in either a mid-season finale or even a season finale, which is kind of funny given that, we have another handful of episodes to go until we actually get to the season finale.
And I will say this, it excited me to see more of this. So it sort of piqued my interest as to where they're going to take this in the season finale. And, I mean, knowing them, I don't expect it to be definitive or conclusive, but I'm sure it will be interesting.
Yeah, I'm very curious I was curious to see how you'd react to this episode, of course, but I'm definitely curious to see how you react to the season finale when we get there.
After the Roswell incident in 1947, even at the brink of the Cold War, there was an ultra-secret conference attended by the United States, the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, Britain, both Germanys, France, and it was agreed that should any extraterrestrial biological entity survive a crash, the country that held that being would be responsible for its extermination. I have the distinction of being one of 3 men to have exterminated such a creature. Maybe it didn't know what a gun was, or perhaps they don't show emotion. But that innocent and blank expression as I pulled the trigger has haunted me. Until I found you. That's why I come to you, Mr. Mulder, and will continue to come to you to atone for what I've done. And maybe sometime, through you, the truth will be known.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. And if you did, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a like, take a minute to write a positive review, and go ahead and spread the word on social media. The podcast is available on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. Look for the Erix Antoine Network on Facebook. You can also follow me on Twitter at ErixAntoineNet and check out my film reviews on Letterboxd. You should also check out Daniel Baldwin's website, theschlocketeer.com, and follow him on Twitter at Daniel W. Baldwin. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back in a few days when Daniel and I will be discussing Miracle Man, which is another confusingly titled episode that suggests resurrections or something thereof, and even a hardcore fan like Daniel is not sure which one of the Back from the Dead episodes it is. In any case, I hope you'll join us and find out. And until then, let's all remember that the truth is out there. See you next time.